Hello everybody, I'm Ian Abernethy, and in this video I want to talk to you about Hiki-Te, the subject that just will not go away, right? So you've got the Hiki-Te is the hand on the hip. It's massively misunderstood. It shouldn't be. There's no excuse for it to be. What Hiki-Te is for is very clear. From a point of view of physics, biomechanics, tactics, historically, it's very clear what Hiki-Te is for. Nothing to do with power generation, okay? So the first thing I want to talk about is why this misunderstanding has came into being. Hiki-Te is misunderstood because kata is misunderstood. The techniques of the kata are for use in non-consensual violence. So they're for the use against criminals in self-defense. It's not for dueling with a fellow martial artist. So, and there's lots and lots of evidence for that, and this is not the subject of the video, but to give one compelling piece, Anko Itosu, who was the guy who made the Pinan katas, who was the, Funakoshi's the father of modern karate, Itosu was the grandfather, right? And Itosu, in 1908, he said that karate is not intended to be used against a single adversary, so a consensual fight. It is a method of avoiding injury by using the hands and feet should one by chance be confronted by a villain or ruffian, right? So again, villains and ruffians, right? Should one by chance be confronted by, it's not for consensual violence, it's for non-consensual violence, right? Consensual violence, when two martial artists spar, tends to be at a distance, right? So they move outside, kicking range, so they're not just going to get kicked as they stand there, and they move back and forth and they look for an opening, and that's dueling skills, all right? That's not self-defense skills. It's not what the kata's about. When we look at the kata, we see the hands are always active. Like as Motobu said, never have a dead hand, never have a shite. The hands should be active. So when I'm at close range, I need to be jamming the enemy's potential shots. I need to be controlling them with grips. I need to be feeling where they are through movement, and the hands need to be active, right? When I'm at a distance, the hands cannot be active because there's too big a gap. So while it would be obvious that the hand on the hip at close range, the pulling hand is pulling. That's the definition. That's what it's for. It's for pulling, right? But as soon as you, we'll talk more about that in a moment, but as soon as you move far apart, it's got nothing to do. And because it's got nothing to do, people go, why are we pulling our hands to hips when that's a bit weird? Because why don't we keep it up in the guard? We must be pulling it up for some reason, surely. And then they invent this false notion that it's for power generation, right? And we'll debunk that in a minute, but the next thing I want to talk about is what Hiki-Te is actually for, what it was supposed to be used for. So the clue, the big clue, is the name of the technique, right? Hiki-Te, two characters. Te, as we all know, means hand. Hiki means to pull. It's a pulling hand. And pulling is enacting a force on something. So you need something to enact that force on. It's not the withdrawing hand or the retracting hand. It's the pulling hand because it's pulling, right? Funakoshi, in his first book, he said the purpose of Hiki-Te is to grab and twist the enemy's limbs in order to disrupt their posture. Right? It's very clear. It's the active use. And you see this consistently throughout the older literature. Now, of course, as karate develops, we've developed this weird habit of, the 3-step, 5-step sparring thing of, trying to use close-range techniques at a distance, and you see empty hands on the hips. But originally, that was never the intent. The pulling hand is pulling, right? And it's well established that it's got something in it when it comes back. So what it'll do is, it will, as Funakoshi said, it'll grab and whip on the limbs so the enemy's posture is disrupted. That's one thing it can do. The other thing it can do is just simply move the arm out of the way so you can land a shot. So as I frequently say at seminars, I stand at close range and go, which is most effective? And on one of them, I'll keep my guard up. On one of them, I'll grab the enemy's arm and hit them. And the other one, I'll pull my hand with nothing in the hip to hit it. And most people go, well, the grabbing the arm to create the opening was the most effective one because you've taken control of one of his arms. That looks exactly like the basic lunging punches we see in kata, basic gakizukis we see in kata. They then say the next effective one is when you've got your guard up, and everyone would agree the least effective one is when you pull your hand to your hip, because there's all kinds of tactical problems and with that as well. So Hiki-Te, its name suggests, is the pulling hand. The old masters were very clear on what it was for. It's for pulling, surprisingly. That's why it got the name pulling hand. It's for telling you where the enemy is through proprioception, grabbing him and feeling him as he moves. So like a hockey fight, I've got some kind of control of you. That's what your basic punch is all about. Pull with one hand as you hit him with the other one. It's not empty coming back. It's got clothing in it. It's got a limb in it. It's got hair in it. It's pulling on something. Tells you where he is through proprioception, disrupts his posture, get the limbs out of the way so we land shots. And at close range, that's what its job is. So as karate starts to evolve and they start, considering fighting each other at a distance, they take the techniques of the kata and then try and apply them to distance fighting, and of course it doesn't work. And one of the glaring problems you get is this close range fighting technique, this pulling hand, which has a role at close range. If you do the same motion at a distance, it has no role, right? And people misunderstand this, and then they go, well, I don't know, it's pulling the hand to the hip, why would we do that? Power generation comes the argument, but it's a fundamentally flawed argument. It's wrong. The argument goes along the lines of, if you pull on one side, that will send one side backwards, and that in turn will send this side forward. So we pivot round a central axis, send part of your body weight flying that way with the arm, and that will send this arm flying in that direction. And that seems logical until you look at it for more than a couple of seconds, right? Instant first fault with it, if you're doing that as a rotation, you've got half your body going forwards and half it going the wrong way. So before we've even started, your strike is 50% weaker than it could have been, right? Because you're not getting the body mass behind the shot. The way the rotation should happen is like this, with one side being fixed and the other side rotating around it. You shouldn't have anything going in the opposite direction to the strike. You want as much of your weight as possible going in that direction. The other reason why it's flawed is people think of it like a seesaw, children's seesaw. If I push down on one end, the other end will shoot up. It's just a pivot in the middle. But your body's not a pivot in the middle. It's got muscles and structures, and it can move on its own, right? You don't need to send this arm flying backwards in order to get this arm going forwards. This arm can move forwards on its own. My body can rotate on its own. I've got chest muscles and muscles in my torso. I've got muscles in my legs, and I can drive from the floor and push through my hips, and rotate my body, and in that way, I send this side of my body going forwards. It doesn't need this arm shooting back in that direction, right? And I mean, even if I give you that, which I'm not going to, but even if I did, you've got this arm, it's very light. It's a tiny part of your body mass, right? It's shooting in that direction, just like the seesaw. If I've got, 6% of my body weight shooting that way, well, what does it send going forwards? If it was like a seesaw, yeah? Not 100%, is it? You know what I mean? You need to make sure that you're driving actually with the body itself. A smaller amount of weight going in that direction doesn't mean a massive amount of weight going in this direction, right? Even if we accept it's just a pivot, which it's not. Again, the body has muscles in it. So the idea it's to do with power generation is just fundamentally wrong. It is incorrect. And it's not a matter for opinion on this either. It's just flat out wrong. If you look at like boxers, Thai boxers, MMA fighters, they hit really hard without pulling the hand back to the hip, right? Now, from day one, I don't know if I was just really lucky in the dojo I walked into, I don't know, but from day one, I was taught two versions of the reverse punch. I was taught a version with my guard up, where I rotated my hip and my heel came off, right? And that was the fighting version. That was the one we'd use when we spar each other and we've got a bit of room, right? And then we had the traditional version where the feet are more planted for stability, and I've got the hand coming back to the hip, and it's a pulling hand, and that's pulling and it's opening them up. So it's a matter of using the right tool for the right job. And if you're talking close range combat, guards don't really have a role to play. The hands should be active, which is why you don't see guards in the kata, but you do see hands across the chest and pushed up and across and on the side of the body. They're controlling limbs. They've got nothing at all to do with power generation. So now let's talk about tactical issues, right? So power generation wise, the hand pulling back the hip, it doesn't work. But let's just say you're going to do it anyway, right? You don't believe me, and you're going to pull your hand to the hip because you falsely believe it'll generate more power. In doing that, you are making a ton of tactical errors, right? Key one of which is you are surrendering a large amount of your ability to control the middle ground where all the action happens, right? Where grips get exchanged, where shots come through, they've got to get their arms through your arms and vice versa, right? And if you pull your hand back to your hip, it's tactically the same as playing a game of soccer and sending half your players off the field, right? You're taking that hand out of play by pulling it all the way back. Again, masters were very clear on this. Multiboosts never have a dead hand, and you've just created one. But it's not doing anything active, it's not helping, it's just run to the back of the field to sit there and do nothing, right? It's not serving any purpose. You've lost control. That's one thing it does. The other thing is, so you can't jam the enemy's shots in the way that you could. You can't have your hands already proactively in the way to prevent them from getting their shots. So they have free reign. They can just come in straight in at you. That's another big problem it introduces. And it slows down the rate of fire massively as well. Because now what you've got is, you've got this hand going all the way back. For the next shot, it has to go all the way out again, presumably where your other hand will make the same mistake. So, tactically, it's really bad. So it's the idea that Hiki-Te say an empty hand should come to your hip is wrong historically, it's wrong biomechanically, and it's wrong tactically. So I've been at this game long enough to know that having made this video, those who are strongly of the view that Hiki-Te is for power generation will not change the viewpoint, right? And wherever I post this video, there'll be loads of comments telling me I'm wrong, right? It's a pointless discussion because, you know, sometimes things are a matter of opinion or a debate. Historically, it's very clear. Biomechanically, it's very clear. And tactically, it's very clear. Pulling an empty hand to the hip is a dumb move. It just is, right? So why people hold on to this so firmly, and let's be clear, when they do that, it's damaging to karate. They are making themselves less powerful and less tactically efficient, and they're doing so under the name of the art that I love. And that's why, you know, grinds my gears. They shouldn't do it. But anyway, but they're going to. And the reason they're going to do it is because of they've invested emotional energy into their karate. Their karate is something that they value and they take great pride in, right? And then when somebody comes along and goes, pulling your hand to your hips, not for power generation, and they've been told that, or maybe they've even taught that themselves, that seems to devalue what they've emotionally invested in, right? So if people are prepared to look at the logics of it, the history of it, the tactics of it, there's only one way you can jump based on that information. But people are reluctant to do that based on dogma. And let me be clear, I ain't criticizing, because we all do it to varying degrees in different aspects of our life, right? It's human nature. But anyone at all who came to karate with no dog in the fight, they'd say, do you think it's a good idea to pull your hand to your hip in order to generate power, right? No one would say it was a good idea. You walk into a boxing gym and say, do you know what, guys, you're missing a trick here. As powerful as you are, you could be more powerful if you pulled your hand to your hip. You won't find a single boxer that'll take that idea on, because they'll instantly go, well, why would I want to do that? And why don't it slows me down? I don't think it adds any power anyway. I don't see what you're talking about. The only reason people believe this is because they didn't understand what the kata was about. They didn't understand it was for close range. They took a bad guess at what it might be about and then became emotionally invested in that idea, and therefore they're reluctant to give it up. Now, again, so if you're one of those people, this video will have annoyed you. I'm sure it will have. You'll have got all upset and hot under the collar about it. But, you know, take a deep breath and think it through. You know what I mean? I'm trying to help you here, right? And I would imagine for those people who are already of the view, you'll just go, yeah, we've got it too. But I think for the future of karate, we need to get to the point where it's just evidence-based and objective-driven, right? So, you know, does pulling your hand to your hip make a punch more powerful? It demonstrably does not, right? Historically, what's the evidence? What was it used for? It was used for locating, and it was pulling. It's called the pulling hand. It's all there. We need to look at what the evidence is, and that's when karate really shines. That's when the beauty of it and the efficiency of what's in the kata really shines. But because some people aren't prepared to criticize ourselves, people from outside karate look in and criticize us with full validity, because they look at us and go, oh, look at them dumb guys, dumb martial artists, pulling their hands to the hip in the belief it increases power. And you know, and we argue back, at least some of us do, yeah, you're right, it's damaging to karate, it really is. We need to look at the evidence, and we need to be prepared to criticize ourselves. And if you're not prepared to do that, and you're going to dogmatically stick to the fact, you know, that pulling your hand to the hip helps power generation, I'm strongly of the view you're harming the art that we all claim to love.